Sorry,
Okay,
Dave.
that's okay, no problem. Technology. Um, Also, if hunters out there have ever been out on game lands, seen a recent timber harvest, you might have seen a deer fence. We resorted to doing some deer fencing when deer populations were high in areas and impacting the regeneration negatively. And what we'd really like to do is get away from deer deterrent fencing on game lands. And if we can help hunters find the better deer habitat, help hunters find those deer, increase their success a little bit on game lands, maybe we can still mitigate the deer impacts on that new regeneration, and hopefully create a healthier habitat instead of using deer fencing. So talking about enhancing the hunter experience on game lands, like I said, finding those best habitats by providing these focus maps, and I'll show you some examples of what those maps will look like here in a few minutes. And really, it's not necessarily just the delimited boundaries of the habitat improvement, but really that habitat improvement spot and kind of the surrounding landscape that those deer are using in their home range. And the maps will also highlight the accessible roads and again, those landscape areas containing habitat improvement work. And that picture there was a buck I was able to harvest in 2012 on game lands in McKean County. That buck came right out of a recent timber harvest on that game lands that morning. So those deer, and especially up in the big woods country, they like to use those thick, new regenerating clear cuts. What you can see here, providing better access to some of these roads. On the right-hand side at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a road here that was developed through a timber sale process. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a stand of timber that we did a thinning in, and we built a new road, and that's, as you can see, a pretty robust piece of infrastructure there. And by opening that road, we can get hunters back in there quite a bit deeper and have more access. We really want to get guys within, about a half a mile of these habitat improvements. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see an aerial overview of a state game lands. The red is the boundary of the game lands, and the yellow is indicative of publicly open roads. So those are township roads. And what you can also see is some of the habitat improvements. You look at some of these timber harvests back in the interior of this piece of game lands, like this one right here that I'm running the mouse across. I think you can see that. It's pretty tough to access from any of these roads. So if you can see right here, there's a gated road that's a timber sale haul road that I'm tracing with the mouse cursor here that goes back into the center of this game lands. It goes way back into here. So think about the accessibility for hunters to these habitats. If we can open up that road and get hunters back in the middle of that, into an area that's largely inaccessible by both terrain and roads. So that's the goal of opening up some more roads, getting the hunters better access to these habitats. And like I said, assisting hunters by highlighting areas with recent habitat improvements. So putting these on maps that are readily available instead of forcing hunters to do all their own pre-scouting by just going to Google Images or Google Earth or whatever, Bing Maps or whatever people use out there. If we can kind of preload that stuff for you and get you in the zone, and try to get you directed to some of these spots that we're actively improving habitat and we're seeing deer browse impacts in particular, then we can start hunters off on the right foot, so to speak. And if you're one of those hunters that has to travel a long ways and you don't have a lot of time to get there to kind of pre-scout the game lands, maybe you can use this as a tool to help zero you into a potential likely spot to target. So we're going to have these maps available in a couple different ways. They're going to be on an interactive layer on the Game Commission Mapping Center, which I'll show you at the end of the webinar here. We're going to make them in PDF formats, and there'll be links on the website where you can open up those PDF maps and just go ahead and print an 8.5 by 11 map for you to carry right in the woods. And if you need to stop into a regional office, hopefully we're going to have these maps available there too at a kiosk where they can print you one out pretty quickly. And talking about reducing deer fencing, as a deer hunter, the last thing in the world I want to do is put up more deer fences on game lands. But we also don't want to be hurting our habitat by doing timber harvest work and then not regenerating a good healthy forest again. So if we can cut down on the use of deer fencing and maintaining those fences, which is a big cost to us, we can allow deer and other wildlife the full utilization of those regenerating forest habitats, and it'll aid in a healthy, diverse habitat that will ultimately have a higher carrying capacity across the board for all wildlife. And really that's the final objective with opening up some of these places. Here's just an example of what a deer hunter focus map might look like. I don't know how well you can read the legend down there, but the orange is the game lands boundary. And on this game lands in particular, a township road comes up this valley right here, and then there's a gate right here where it comes onto game lands. Well, there's a lot of interior to this game lands that doesn't have any public road access. So you can see these red highlighted areas. That's indicative of where we've been doing the habitat work and where we're encouraging hunters to go give a try looking for their deer. And this orange represents what will be a seasonally open road, and then the yellow represents a new special open road to get back into this interior here. You can imagine how much of a hike it would be across this mountaintop to get back into this spot if we didn't have these roads open, being that it's private land down here below the game lands towards the public highway. And this is just an example of the signs you'll see. We're hoping to have these posted at the gates to all the access roads, and then again back in the game lands to kind of let you know when you're in the area. They're not going to be surrounding the whole deer hunter focus area, but there'll be a sign on that road back in there to let you know when you're in the right spot. Last year, 2015 hunting seasons was the first time that we had tried this. We had 37 individual state game lands involved with 64 total areas identified as deer hunter focus areas. This year for the 2016 hunting seasons, that's increased to 45 game lands with a total of 87 different deer hunter focus areas. And for those of you that know about our game land system, we've got over 300 individual properties of game lands out there. So while 45 game lands with 87 areas might seem like a lot, there's still a whole bunch of game lands out there where you can go if you're looking for that more remote experience and less of a crowd potentially. So we're cognizant of both ends of the fact that people want to be in an area where there's maybe more deer, maybe more hunters moving deer around, and then there's other people's hunting style that they like a kind of a peaceful wilderness experience. So we're making sure that we're trying to balance both ends of that spectrum. So just in summary, maybe this went a little bit quicker than 20 minutes. I'm not sure where we're at with the clock, but we're really trying to increase hunter accessibility on game lands, helping hunters focus on those best habitats, maybe cut down on their time and scouting and things like that. And again, more info on the website. And I'm going to transition over to that screen here, I hope, and see if I can show you how to navigate through that. So I'll get rid of this. Can you see this? Okay, you can see the homepage for the Pennsylvania Game Commission's website. And if you look over here in the quick clicks column, we just put the link up today. And if you scroll down, you can see right here it says Deer Hunter Focus Areas. And with one click on that, it takes me to the Deer Hunter Focus Area page. So this is an interactive map that you'll find in the middle. And if I click on that map, it'll bring up an ArcGIS web application. And we've used little deer icons across the state to just kind of highlight where these areas are at. It's coming. So we'll click OK there. So if I was interested in, let's say, hunting up in northern Potter County somewhere, if my camp's up in that area and I'm looking for a new spot to hunt, I can see there's a little deer icon up there. So I can scroll in, or I can just click on the deer, and that pops up and it says it's on State Game Lands number 59. And I can click this little zoom to, and that pulls me all the way in, and it shows the GIS layer of the game lands, shows the topo map background. Close that, and then you can see the area that we've identified that, oh, there's a game lands boundary. The orange boundary shows the game lands boundary, and we're looking at that northern portion of State Game Lands number 59 right there. If we zoom back out, go up here, and zoom out and see if I can find another one of our deer icons. And it looks like over here in Warren County we have several. So if I zoom in over here in Warren County, I can start to see these maps popping up. You can kind of do it either way. You can click on the deer icon and zoom to it, or you can just pick an area and continue to move the mouse in, zoom in, and there you can see State Game Lands number 86, which is just north of the town of Tityute along the river, and you can see the yellow highlights the access roads going into these deer hunter focus areas on the game lands. Also, what we've done is for people that don't want to bother zooming and clicking around on that statewide interactive map, on the same page, just scrolling down, there's a list by county of the different game lands and the deer hunter focus areas on those game lands. So we just looked at Game Lands 86, and if I scroll down and find Warren County, there's the Game Lands 86, and it'll load up a PDF map, and these look like they're pretty big maps, so it might take a minute to load. And this is just, we pre-selected the defined outer limits of the area of the game lands and put it on a PDF map so that if you choose to, you can pull up this PDF copy of a map and then just go right to the print process and print this out and just carry it in your pocket with you if you're interested in hunting up there in Game Lands 86. So with that, Lori, I think I can take questions if we have any.
Okay. While we're waiting for folks to send their questions in, I have a couple. We clicked through a window on the ArcGIS map. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in that window? Is that directions on how to use it?
Oh yeah, sorry. We can do that again. So I'll just click on the interactive map screen and it'll bring up another window. And then there's a splash screen that shows up before you get into using the map. And it tells you a little about the program, tells you to scroll down for directions, tells you how to click on a deer icon if it's in an area where you're looking for. And then you can click the zoom to feature. It'll tell you what's on the map, the legend, things like that. It'll show you how to use the controls on the map up in the upper left-hand corner to zoom in, zoom out, go back to the home view, which is the statewide picture.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
And then we don't have any questions coming in just yet, but we've got the same one here. When will the roads be open?
Okay, so it's a little bit dependent on which region you're in. In some regions, it's a little bit different than others. One example would be if you happen to be in the Elk area, where our Pennsylvania elk are, up in Elk and Cameron County around Benezet. Those roads are going to hopefully be open for the first early muzzleloader season in October. But because of the elk hunt and because of the kind of the sensitivity around that area, those roads are likely going to be closed down until after the elk hunt's over, and then they'll reopen again. Everywhere else, we're looking to have those roads open at a minimum for the early muzzleloader season in October, and then for the 2-week general rifle deer season later after Thanksgiving in the normal 2-week season. But some regions have opened those roads up already. Some of the seasonally open roads are open in the Northeast, I know, and I think other regions are doing the same. So it's a little bit regionally dependent. It depends on the condition of the roads a lot of times. If we have active timber sale operations in there, we kind of want to wait till we get it done and get the roads graded off and put them back into a good condition. And as always, I would say the one caveat for all these roads is if we happen to get a really bad weather event, if we get a deep snow or if we get some ice and these roads are getting a lot of traffic and they become dangerous, we may have to close them down for a period of time if we have a weather issue. So just because it's listed as a deer hunter focus area and open road, you may find a gate closed if it's inclement weather. If we get a lot of rain and the road turns to mud and people are getting stuck and things like that, we wouldn't want to have people walking out from 1.5 miles back in where we just opened a road to get them in there too. So there's that one caveat on those roads.
Well, we appreciate that. Do you have any idea how crowded those areas may get if they get crowded? Have you had feedback on that?
We got some good feedback last year. I think, being 1 year, it's hard to say, and I think it's going to vary a lot by game lands to game lands. I personally hunted up in Forest County on a deer hunter focus area last year in the middle weekend of the rifle deer season, and while there seemed to be quite a few vehicles and a lot of people at the parking area and a lot of people coming in on that road, there was enough terrain that people seemed to spread out. And while I saw a lot of vehicles in there, I didn't see many hunters actually in the woods. We weren't stepping on each other.
Well, that's good. Did hunters feel that they had higher success in those areas in 2015?
Yeah, we had some good feedback. There was actually I think it was WNEP News out around Schuylkill County in the eastern part of the state, did a video interview with some hunters that were pretty happy that had normally hunted a hunt club and decided to check out this deer hunter focus area in the game lands, and opening morning they were able to actually take a couple deer, I think, and they were pretty thrilled. So we've gotten some pretty good feedback. As always, we've got a few people that were maybe a little unhappy because they had spent the time pre-scouting and found a really good spot, and then found out that we identified that area as a deer hunter focus area. And so, there's always those trade-offs. And myself, I'm the kind of hunter, I like to get back into the woods away from the crowds and things like that. But, it's everybody wants something different, and we're trying to make sure we provide something for everybody. Sometimes those things overlap and cause a little bit of a conflict, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Sounds good. Is there any possibility of ever opening those roads up for early archery season?
Early archery season meaning special regs, or early archery season just meaning the 1st of October as normal? Like I said, some regions are already opening their seasonal roads. They're already open. I know in the Northeast region, the roads that are labeled as seasonal access are already open. Again, it's kind of regionally dependent, and it's kind of road condition dependent on when we can open up those roads and how much traffic they can withstand based on their condition. If it's a road that we use a lot for administrative access or repetitively for timber hauling or other operations like that, it'll probably be a road that's in pretty good shape. So even regionally, there might be some differences. One game lands may have roads open a little sooner than others just based on their conditions. So I think it's our objective through this program to try to get those roads open earlier and earlier for hunters. So last year it was kind of, I think it was just, most of them were for the 2-week rifle deer season. This year we're really focusing on making sure they're open before that early muzzleloader and junior and senior rifle hunt window in October.
Sounds like lots of good opportunities. We have another question here. They're curious about estimates of deer herd in the focus areas versus regular game lands.
I was going to say something in the beginning about why, as a forester, talking about deer hunter focus areas, we haven't really taken estimates of deer numbers. What we're looking at is the habitat we've created and the impacts we're seeing on that habitat. So I think there's a correlation, and anybody that's been out there checking out where deer like to hang out in that new browse that we create with our habitat efforts, you'll generally, I guess, say you would find higher densities of deer around those areas, and that's what we hope. But as far as having survey numbers about actual deer densities, I can't say we actually have that. But we have evidence that deer are frequenting those areas by looking at the plants that they're eating.
Gotcha. We have a question about Potter County, Susquehanna State Forest.
Okay.
Hunting above Lyman Run State Park in the DMAP area.
Okay.
I see the map has overstory and shelterwood cuttings. How old are the cuttings? Would you know that?
So I think you're probably talking about DCNR, Bureau of Forestry's Hunter Interactive Map that they can put layers on and off. And I don't know in particular, but I think somewhere on that webpage it'll tell you that when they highlight an area as a shelterwood cut or an overstory removal cut, it's usually within the last 10 years, if I remember correctly. But that's DCNR's website. We don't have those kinds of layers yet available on the Game Commission's interactive page. We're hoping down the road in a few years maybe we'll have something that looks like that too.
All right, we have a question about the specific type of habitat that you're creating out there.
Yeah, young forest. These areas are places where we're taking mature forests and turning it into young forests, and that means timber harvests. Places where we're going in and our foresters are out there making the decisions about when an area is ready and when we've got regeneration coming along, and we want to break up the age class and try to create that young forest habitat that lots of wildlife need, not just deer, but deer are browsers primarily. Yeah, they eat acorns and they eat corn in the fields, but through the winter and through the spring, when none of those crops are available, they're eating woody browse in the forest. So the habitats you're going to be looking at when you will go into these areas are, I would say, within the past 5 years or so, there's been some kind of timber harvest in there, and there is regenerating undergrowth. So there's places within these deer hunter focus areas that are pretty thick, pretty nasty, pretty tough to get in, and that's where the deer are in there hiding. And so that's why we didn't want to just put the shape of where the timber harvest was, but kind of draw people to the surrounding area too, because those deer are using all those habitats in and around those freshly managed areas.
That makes sense. Are you at all concerned about hunter safety in those areas where you're drawing hunters in?
I think we're always concerned about hunter safety. And I think anytime you got a lot of hunters in one place, they should probably be a little more cognizant of the fact that you might run into a little bit higher crowd of hunters potentially. And I think that's right back to your basic hunter safety rules. You know your target, what's beyond it, and just be careful. And I don't think we have any evidence to support that there's been any increased issues with doing this last year. So I would just say if everybody follows the rules they learned in hunter safety, we should be in pretty good shape.
That sounds good to me. Food plots. Are food plots being planted to complement the newly cut areas?
I won't call them food plots per se, but the old log landings. Anytime we retire a timber sale, if you've ever been out there in the forest on the game lands, you'll see whenever we do a timber sale, we've got to clear out an area for the log trucks to load and deck the logs. Whenever we're done with those operations, we have a specific seed mix that we make those loggers go back in and replant, typically along the access roads coming in, and those log landings will be reseeded. Typically we use a clover, oats, or wheat mix. So I was actually just up on one of these in Warren County last week that we just retired the timber sale a few weeks ago. They freshly seeded it. The clover was already popping up, and there was deer tracks all through the log landing. So not food plots per se. We don't really plant like turnips or corn or things like that, but those log landings become herbaceous cover, and we specifically plant those down with clover to encourage foraging of deer and turkeys and other things too.
Good deal. And we've got one more question here asking if the same deer focus areas are open for bear hunting.
I can't answer that. I think the intent is that these roads will be open from the early muzzleloader season all the way through the rifle deer season, not just the 1 week in October and then the 2 weeks of rifle season. The intent is that we're going to try to open them up beginning with that early muzzleloader season and then running all the way through the end of rifle deer season. So that would include the bear season time frame. But I can't guarantee that. Like I said, region by region, there may be some differences of roads they need to close or open. But I think the intent is that we want to see all those roads open for that entire time period.
All right, we had one more come in while you were talking. Are you familiar with hinge cutting some of the younger timber to aid in creating bedding areas?
Yes, I am familiar with hinge cutting, and from our perspective, what we're really looking at is landscape scale management on the game lands. And I think hinge cutting can be a valuable practice when you're looking at small properties and you're trying to increase some security cover for deer on a small property. But when we're looking at managing these game lands in thousands and thousands of acres at a time, we're creating a boatload more bedding and security cover for those deer by creating 50, 60, 70 acre areas of young forest habitat with that good thick young growth with briars and new stump sprouts and new regenerating trees. So hinge cutting is not a practice that we use a lot on game lands, again, simply because of scale and the effort that it takes to do hinge cutting.
Sounds good. Well, I think that just about wraps us up. This session, at least most of it, has been recorded, and you should receive an email with a link to the recording within the next few hours. The recording will also be uploaded to the Game Commission's YouTube channel. I'd like to thank Dave Gustafson for sharing his expertise and time with us today, and we'd also like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon, and hope you'll visit us again to learn more about Pennsylvania wildlife in upcoming webinars. And until then, we hope you're able to get outside and enjoy some of Pennsylvania's great outdoors.